pretty well. And it's just a long haul. It's a long haul because it is. A lot of people are kind of comparing it to the .com, but I don't really like stock comparisons because it's just not the same industry at all.
Right. No, not at all.
Not at all.
And in many cases, you're talking about future value and what is perceived to be the future value.
Right.
Obviously, that's true for stocks as well, but we're talking about something very nascent. Versus, it would be nascent to compare it to a stock much earlier in its development. Like when Amazon crashed in the 2000s, it was already a well-established company and had revenues to look at and all that stuff. With some of these crypto projects, it's just it's like a promise. It's like it might work, it might not.
Right. And it's based on ostensible programmer genius,
right,
and future adoption.
100%.
And that's different than like a company that deals in earnings reports that are based in fiat, and like Bitcoin is a more mature asset, and a lot of the crypto projects are a more mature asset than Amazon was in 2001 or whatever,
or are addressing a bigger market potential than they were at that time. Of course, they've expanded into many other business ventures.
Right.
I was just in a Prince mood today.
Oh, dude.
I was listening to Purple Rain. I can't play much of it because we'll get copyrighted on YouTube, but like you never done before.
Well, I'm not sure about Morgul's availability today.
Okay. Sorry.
I let him know that the call line was going to be open 2 to 5 today, and for him to call him, I gave him the number and everything, but haven't heard back. He's very much a vagabond. So
that's what I've gathered, and that's fine. I didn't build a show with him on it. We can do that some other time, but if he calls in, that'd be great.
Yeah, it'd be awesome.
It'd be impromptu, probably a little more organic than an agenda we would plan with him specifically.
For sure.
All right, we got some folks trickling into the YouTube chat. Hello from Norway, Earth Circus. Yeah, ain't it? Earth Circus, that's what we're experiencing for sure. All right, I'm going to do some intro music and get started.
Word.
You're listening to episode 34 of Zetetic News Cast. We're your hosts, Dave, and Xavier Diamant. It's May 19th, 2022, and we are live. Excited to be here. We got a huge show planned. Lots to talk about. We haven't spoken since April, and my, how quickly things change in such a short period of time.
Holy moly.
Once again, we're your hosts, Dave. Thank you guys for joining. If you have joined, want to also just go ahead and give out the phone number to call in. We do have a call-in line. We're going to leave it running the whole show. We do have some things we want to cover off the top, but if you are spurned to give us a ring and we see you in the queue and it makes sense to pull you in, we'll get your thoughts on everything we're talking about. So that number is 855-877-5112. It's also in the description and the title of today's show. So what is today's show called? Well, we're going to be discussing, I think we should focus on solutions as much as we focus on problems. Like, it's getting to that point where everyone kind of understands that we're in war. It is war. So the rules have changed.
Multidimensional.
The rules have changed. Once you acknowledge that fact, the whole civil society, the way things were and have been are those rules are out the window now. The way things are going, and I'll talk more about why I'm saying that. But to kick today's show off, we are on Thursday, so we're going to do Thesaurus Thursday, and for today's word of the day, it is sub silentio. Let me pull it up here. It's a legal Latin term meaning under silence or in silence. It's reference to something that is implied but not expressly stated. So it might be something that one presumes because of something else, or something that is assumed based on silence, or it might be assumed because of your silence. All of those different variations are what I consider the sub silentio kind of mechanism. And the title I came up with was sort of discussing solutions to sub silentio suicide, because more and more it's becoming evident that we as individuals have a hand in all of this. Like, we can't just sit here and point fingers at the bad actors, although we can and we will and we should. We also have to sort of point it back at ourselves and understand how we got into the mess that we're in. Now, you might be thinking, well, I didn't have anything to do with the oil prices, skyrocketing, or this sort of delegation of blame, to some other third party. I don't think that's the answer. We should hold those who are responsible for crimes accountable, but we can't always control all those factors. We can only really control ourselves. So I wanted to focus on, these different issues that are coming up as through the lens of how we as individuals are maybe participating or giving psychic energy to these different manifestations, and how we can sort of reverse that. We talked before about, determining your own destiny, believe it to achieve it, these kinds of ideas. You can't just think about something, you have to do something too. And so that's where the whole sub silentio thing comes into play. And the logo, I just want to call out, or the thumbnail for today's show, I got Sub-Zero from Mortal Kombat. And he's represented by the IRS, the FBI, the Department of Homeland Security. You could add 24 other different agencies to that. And they're basically, they assume so much of their quote unquote constituents through sub silentio sort of mechanisms. And on the other side, you've got Goro being ice blasted by these entities, and I put some logos there, like the dollar, the Bitcoin, the symbol for justice, the ways and measures, checks and balances, the Constitution, Bitcoin, Tbill, Theta. Pick your crypto, right? Pick your economy. It's war. Like, we're under attack. And that is just becoming so much more crystallized every single day. So sub silentio, the real context that I'm thinking of for sub silentio is how we consent to participate as a citizen. I've talked about this many times before. We volunteer ourselves for certain things, not really being fully informed about what we're volunteering for. Mm-hmm. And this starts so early. Like, it starts literally at birth. You were issued a birth certificate with the name that your parents gave you. And it's kind of interesting, the transgender thing, because it is challenging that system in a way, like hey, I didn't consent to be called a male or female. Obviously, we know that's ridiculous in a way, because we're trying to create new definitions for these things. But at the same time, it does beg the question, hey, why do I have to ask them permission to get married? Why do I have to ask them permission to do X, Y, Z? Why can't I just why can't I change my name and identify myself? If you've ever tried to change your name, you have to submit yourself to an FBI background check. You have to give them all sorts of biometrics and then send that, and people say, well, we need to make sure that we're not enabling, identity theft and fraud and all this other stuff. And I'm like, what are you talking about? The FBI protects all of that. They protect that. They actually encourage it, and it's only selective enforcement that they do. So if I want to change my name without submitting my sub silentio jurisdiction to their marriage license, I have to submit to their sub silentio jurisdiction to submit, all this biometric data and other personal details. And oh, by the way, I'm telling them I'm a U.S. citizen, which has a specific and limited defined meaning within statutes and certainly the Internal Revenue Code, which is how they enumerate everybody and categorize them as human resources.
Precisely. I mean, ultimately, it's the neo-feudal plantation, ultimately. And the IRS, the monetary system, is really there as the sort of electric fence for the sheep. They lead around the flock of citizenry through regimented, routinized shock therapy of threats of seizure, garnishment of wages, et cetera, et cetera. So this is a mafioso system that really isn't that much more sophisticated than, the leg breakers, around the corner in the alley. And ultimately, the citizenry has sort of accepted their role as sheep to this system, because the rationale is that the risks of defying it outweigh the benefits of being free from it.
Right.
And that is a sort of terminal, domesticated psychological basis that the authorities want to encourage in not just the realm of finance and taxes, but in every single other purview, cosmologically, theologically, what have you. And that's why I think it's accurate to designate it as a sort of Leviathan state or a beast system, is that it uses its perceived might as the basis for subjugation and subordination by the body politic. And that sub silentio is one of those mechanisms of basically threat. It's basically saying, not only do they presume that you consent, they actively encourage your acquiescence to that silent consent.
Right.
Through threat.
And before I go off on this tangent, I just want to say nothing I say is to be considered financial, legal, or tax advice. This is for entertainment purposes only. Everyone should do their own research and come to their own conclusions.
Just like we have. And
I am actually playing a character here. I'm not representing anybody in particular. I'm playing a character on this show, Zetetic News. But I did want to talk about sub silentio in the context of taxes, because what came up for me, what has been blowing my mind lately is, obviously we're in pretty deep to the crypto market. We own certain different digital assets, and there's a huge open question about, well, what are the tax implications of owning and trading cryptos? It's this nascent thing that has no clear definitions, and maybe I'm just been misled, or I've got misinformation, but I thought crypto was a way out of, a counter to the traditional financial system. Maybe I'm wrong about that. Maybe the goal always was to, basically suck all the liquidity out of the traditional system before its collapse and create some sort of new alternative traditional system, rather than a new barter system that can allow us a degree of freedom and independence that the current system is just never going to give us. I thought that's what it was about, but I've seen these videos, these purported crypto tax experts come out and say how you should treat this, and they paint very broad strokes. They will talk about Bitcoin as if it is seen the same as Theta in the eyes of the IRS, as if they even have the jurisdiction to define said assets in a given way that happens to be taxable. One could argue that a Tfuel token is not a cryptocurrency, although one might accept it as such in their personal business. Mm-hmm. Another way of looking at it is it's a software access token to a decentralized infrastructure. So what's been blowing my mind is I'm hearing these crypto tax experts talk about how to report your assets so you don't get in trouble with the IRS. And of course, the presumption of every single professional tax person is that you are required to file either a 1099 or 1040 individual form income tax. Mm-hmm. And the only reason that they say you need to be honest about it is because the IRS put a little question on there about whether you owned, swapped, received digital assets. And it's just this word of art, digital assets. Mm-hmm. Well, is Adobe Photoshop my digital asset?
Is my PGP key on my encrypted messenger service a digital asset? I mean,
and so what's been blowing my mind too is there was a sort of seen as a landmark case where somebody had reported their staking earnings. So they're staking their crypto. They generated more crypto through the staking protocol, and then they reported that earnings to the IRS, and then they had to go and sue them. They're like, well, these that I told you about, they actually aren't income like everything else that you're taxing me on. So I want that portion of the return back as a deduction.
Right.
And they went to court. They ended up winning. And so now the market is looking at that so does this mean staking earnings aren't what they say? So, they aren't counted as income. But then other people I've talked to, they are indeed reporting that and paying it. So even when they don't sell it into dollars. And this is what is blowing my mind. It's so the IRS can just put a question on there that you have to answer. It's that electric fence mechanism you talked before. It's here's the question. You've already consented to fill this form out, the 1040. Right. You have to fill the form out, meaning you have to answer this question. And if you lie about it, and I decide through some other information that has been reported to us that you are not giving us the fair share of these earnings, we can come after you. So even if that wasn't taxable income to begin with, the fact that you lied about the holdings in the first place is another legal threat that you're putting yourself under when you consent to send that in.
Right.
And so I'm so even for somebody who submits the return, there becomes no room for any kind of earnings that, if you are heavy into crypto, you can't really do that and expect to profit without paying a huge percentage of it in the terms of fiat back to the government. And so, not only do they assign a dollar value to the digital tokens, which existed never before until the staking protocol issues them to you, they assign a dollar value to them at that time, and that's the basis upon which you calculate the amount of tax owed. And they didn't even sell it into dollars, and I'm just like, that is literally like, my chickens laid eggs, I ate the eggs, but it's counted as income,
right?
And I need to pay a dollar value on 20% or 30% of that egg.
On the eggs you earned.
I earned.
And you ate your earnings, right? It's unbelievable.
So this has caused me to just like do an enormous amount of research. And of course, I'm also familiar with like the different tax freedom groups, tax protester movement. Everyone knows Irwin Schiff, that whole story. What's his name? Wesley Snipes. There's very infamous cases. And anytime you talk to anybody about this subject, they are either totally into it or they're just scared shitless. And they're like, well,
I've got nothing to
even
say
if
about
you're
that,
right, I can't talk about it.
Right.
But it's mind blowing when you actually look at it. So not only do they manufacture sub silentio, you submit to sub silentio jurisdiction in a number of different ways on various paper forms. You get accustomed to saying, yes, I'm a U.S. citizen, because nobody argues you live in the United States. But there's a special definition for U.S. citizen.
Right.
It puts you, it basically, in their eyes, you're basically you're electing to report your taxes to them as if you were within the jurisdiction of the District of Columbia, aka you're a federal employee or you are engaged in some sort of excise privilege, like an excise tax. Like if you had a federal contract, one could argue, if you're profiting off of the national government of the United States, you should give a portion of that back to the taxpayers. That's a true internal revenue service where, you know, we're, even if you don't agree that the government should have the ability to basically collect all this tax and then create these little pet projects and stuff, you know, most people agree that we'll have some sort of collective like infrastructure projects and stuff like that. Well, for the profiteers off of these huge government contracts, shouldn't they give a certain portion of that back to the population that they got to benefit from? That is truly what that's a privileged activity. It is not a privileged activity to go out in the private sector and earn a living. That's called a right. And your rights can't be taxed unless you volunteer to have them taxed. And then if you volunteer to have them taxed and you do that so many years in a row, well, can you blame the IRS for assuming that you're going to continue to pay that? Unless you tell them otherwise. That is the rule of commerce. Sub silentio. So let's say you get a notice from a debt collector. If you don't say anything in response to that, in 30 days or so, they're going to assume through your sub silentio lack of communication in silence, the implication is you agree with that. If you disagree with it, you have to tell them. And then you have a dispute on your hand and you can like work that out. So, you know, people think the income tax, and the IRS will say, look at the 16th Amendment. We can levy taxes from any or income from any sources derived. That's what they say in the Constitution. But if you actually read the legislative intent of the 16th Amendment, even there's a whole debate about whether that was even properly ratified. But Taft talked about the legislative intent. It offered no new taxing power.
Right.
It was meant to clarify past attempts by the government to levy a true income tax on basically all that was earned. But that was ruled unconstitutional.
Of course.
So how do they operate unconstitutionally? Well, they've set up an exclusive jurisdiction. It's called the U.S. Tax Court.
Yes.
And when you have, when the IRS perceives that you owe them money, they send you notices saying you owe us this amount. If you disagree, you can open up an appeal. Of course, if they're the ones looking at the appeal, 9 times out of 10, they're always going to be like, denied, you're wrong, we're right, so pay us the money.
Right.
So who's the higher power than them? You have to take it to the U.S. Tax Court. But the problem with the U.S. Tax Court is you have to submit to their territorial jurisdiction before you ever go in and dispute it. So, you know, if you go and pay the amended filing fee and you say, yes, I am a U.S. taxpayer, and I want to dispute the amount that I owe, they're like, okay, come on in. And then the only thing that's in dispute anymore is how much you owe.
Right.
Not whether the applicability of the Internal Revenue Codes apply, or whether,
whether you're being shaken down unfairly in the first place.
Like if there were any due process errors, that should be a part of your petition to the court before you ever even admit to having a liability in the first place. And let's talk a little bit more about what kind of procedural errors could take place. So let's say you're a regular, this is 90% of the population. So for you federal employees, office holders, or federal contractors, you can just shut this part off. But if you're like working in the private sector, you filled out the employment forms, they're generating a W-2, the IRS sees that as income, and then they think you're required to file this 1040 form. So you start hearing from TurboTax around April, January, February timeframe. It's time. It's coming up. That date. Are you required to file? Well, did you have W-2 earnings? Yes. There's another issue here, which is that the employer is basically a de facto agent of the IRS, and because you made certain declarations when you signed up to work there, there are certain sub silentio presumptions made about the activity that you're engaged in there. They actually, the IRS sees it as you're engaged in a trade or business, and of course you look at those terms of art and you say, well, yeah, I'm in business, right? But trade or business is a specifically defined term in the IRC, the Internal Revenue Code, which all agents have to follow, by the way. Most of them don't even know the code.
Of course.
A trade or business is performing the functions of a public office. If you actually read the fucking definitions, that's what it says. And it basically, says within the United States. But when you look at the term United States, it says within the District of Columbia and its territories, Puerto Rico, Guam, these other
We're not talking about the 1776 incremental constitutional republic anymore. We're talking about an admiralty law corporation that represents the so-called nation.
Right, exactly.
And
here's a good chart I've got up on screen, which basically outlines the USC code sections and how many different ones there are, which make this whole matter very, very confusing, because you hear the term United States in a colloquial sense, you think they're talking about the geographic area you live in, the states of the Union, but the term United States does also mean a company. It's the
plantation,
the incorporation, the national government,
right,
which is separate from the republic.
Right. The Republic basically died with the implementation of the income tax, Federal Reserve, and the IRS system.
Right.
I mean, you can basically trace the legalese and the establishment of all statutes thereafter as referring to the U.S. as a mega corporate body. And that the reason why initially they had only counted income as basically surplus revenues from within the corporation is they had every intention of extrapolating that surplus to mean the activities of the populace.
Right.
And so they literally see monies or dollars generated from individuals as being income because those individuals are essentially corporate resources to this mega incorporated state.
Right. And what we find out is that there's a difference between the state and the state.
Yes.
Within each state, there is also a corporate system which has been set up that exists outside of the Constitution. So that's why when you submit yourself to the territorial jurisdiction of the U.S. tax court, and then you go in there and you say, the Constitution doesn't require me to fill out a 1040. They're like, well, what does the Constitution have to do with this? The Constitution doesn't apply there.
Wow. It's the...
Now, if you stand out from the court and you say, I'm in one of the states of the Union and I have rights and here's what they are and this is why I'm not submitting XYZ, and there's you can use the Supreme Court to basically back up why you aren't required to submit to their territorial jurisdiction. They can't really argue with that.
Right.
And so this is just one way I thought we could help expose the sub silentio mechanism while also maybe giving some people food for thought about their personal situation with the state and their finances. And well, let's say you've been filing a 1040 for the last 10 years and now you've come to realize that this national government who you thought you know served your best interests is now your enemy, and you're like, shit, I don't want to subject myself to their information gathering activities. I don't want to tell them any more than I have to tell them anymore, than I have to.
I don't want to give them a pound of flesh to use in their operations.
Yeah, give them money to send over to their illegal operation in the Ukraine while my family needs money, and there's other people in need around me who need money. So if you've come to any of these sort of feelings or sentiments and you are saying to yourself, well, how do I get out now that I've had so many years of compliance? Just understand, number one, you should probably start a correspondence with the IRS and start establishing, your true status with them in a written correspondence so that you have a legal foundation to defend your status. The other thing is, if you're still working a job, I would try to get my employer to stop reporting a W-2 and come with an educated argument as to why they aren't required to, and there is one. I'm not going to go over all the statutes and stuff because I don't have them at my fingertips, but they are not required to report that. They might say they are because they're afraid of the IRS,
right?
But that's not true. And if they continue to do it in the face of your objection to it, well, then how can you say that you're consenting to that report? So that's step one, is establishing that you don't consent to the thing. It may still be done, then that's extortion. That is theft, essentially. They're depriving you of your property as a de facto agent of the IRS. And, that might cause you to have a sleepless night or two, but that's just the reality of the situation. So then what do you do about tax time? 1040 comes up. You don't want to file it anymore because you've figured out the national government wants to kill you and your family. Okay, so you don't file it. Well, you might get a notice saying we think you're required to file. Well, you can respond and tell them why you're not.
Right.
Okay. And again, there are arguments for that. I'll put links in the post that this show will, to some resources people can look at. You can also check out on our site the taxes and lawfare section. There's some good resources in there you can start to research. But so let's say you respond. You say, I'm not going to file. Here are my good reasons why I'm not required to. Please leave me alone. They say, no, we think you were. Here's a notice of deficiency as to, how much you owe based on what? Well, what they do, and I found this out, if you don't file, they think you should. They will sometimes create a substitute for return. So when you get to 1040, it says, testify, this is true and accurate to the best of my knowledge, under penalties of perjury. You're putting yourself in their jurisdiction to be prosecuted for lying to them, which also, by the way, is a violation of the Fourth Amendment, because why should you be compelled? You can't be compelled to provide evidence that could be used as evidence against you to deprive you of your property.
Yes.
Even if you're a criminal, you aren't required to do that. You can plead the Fifth Amendment and say it's a violation of the Fourth. Okay.
Right.
So
So they're really depriving you of your Fifth Amendment as well.
Yeah, because we'll see, if they say you're required to, that's a deprivation. If they say we think you're required to, that opens the door for the sub silentio implication, the consent, basically.
Right.
Oh, they think I am. Do I think I am? And then people make that decision, and then they make that call instead of challenging, the requirement to begin with. But here's what's really interesting, and I think this, hopefully anybody listening, this will be like a major light bulb. They have to follow the law. Okay, they have procedures. Regardless of whether you think the federal income tax is applicable to your wage earnings or not, they have to follow the law. And if you don't follow 1040, they think you should, and then they create a substitute without getting your consent that that's the right information. There's two things that you can use as a defense. Section 6065 of Title 26 of the U.S. Code, that's the Internal Revenue Code codes. Verification of return. Except as otherwise provided by the Secretary, any return declaration, statement, or other document required to be made under any provision of the Internal Revenue laws or regulations shall contain or be verified by a written declaration that is made under the penalties of perjury. So this principle of penalties of perjury that is applied to you when you get a 1040, it's also applied to them. Mm-hmm. But they don't apply it to themselves. You have to apply it to them.
Right.
So if they send you something saying, we think you owe this money, look on that form and see, did they sign it? Is there an individual with their legal first and last name who says this is correct under penalties of perjury? I bet you it's not. And if it's not,
it's color of law.
Can't you say, well, hey, IRS, look at section 6065. This is not signed. What the fuck? Okay, here's the other thing. Let's say it is signed. And we're talking about 1040 now, which applies to most people working in the private sector. Let's say 20% of them stop filing. Okay? But they've been filing, so the IRS thinks that they should continue to file, so they send them automated notices and all this. And then they go through the process, they end up creating substitute returns, and then they sign those. And they say, look, here, we signed this. Well, what about in section 5.1.11.7.7, which is the Internal Revenue Manual? So this is their manual, how to interpret the Internal Revenue Code. It talks about section 6020B authority. Okay, before I go into that, let's look up 6020B. Well, oops. Paper returns executed by the Commissioner or other Internal Revenue officers. In general, if any person required by the Internal Revenue Code or by the regulations to make a return fails to make such a return at the time prescribed, therefore, or makes willfully or otherwise a false, fraudulent, or frivolous return, a authorized Internal Revenue officer or employee shall make such return from his own knowledge and from such information as he can obtain through testimony or otherwise. Okay? So let's take that for a second. So they can create substitute for returns. They give themselves that authority if they say that you're required to, which of course is debatable, but they're going to say that. They make such return from his own knowledge. Well, what knowledge do you have about my citizenship status personally? What knowledge do you have about whether or not my private sector work is actually constituted as a trade or business activity? And, if the Internal Revenue Service is not the witness to this information, who is? Are you going to use the W-2 statement that my employer issued, which I told them not to? You know what I'm saying? because and even the W-2, who signed that? That's a statement, isn't it? That's a declaration of a certain amount of information. Who signed that? Isn't it supposed to be signed based on 6065 or section 6065? Okay. So there's all sorts of issues with the authorization and how they run their business. It's largely automated. They're not signing these documents. If they are, okay, let's say you find a rare scenario where they wanted you to file, you didn't. They create a substitute for return, and then they create a deficiency. Okay, who signed that document? Is it an internal revenue agent? Did they know that they were exceeding their authority to prepare that form based on this section of the Internal Revenue Manual 5.1.11.7.7, where it says the following returns may be prepared, signed, and executed by revenue officers under the authority of Internal Revenue Code section 6020B. So 6020, we just went over that. That's where they give themselves the authority to create the returns. But which forms do they say they have authority under 6020B to create? Form 1040 is not on there. You see all these other forms, which are basically like, where did it go? I lost it. Here are the forms.
Yeah.
Employer's annual federal unemployment tax return. Form 941, 943, 944, 720, 22, 90, CT1, 1065. So there is no delegation of authority, even in their manual, that gives them the authority to create a substitute for return 1040 and submit it on your behalf. And if it's signed by them, you can cite Section 1203 of the IRS Restructuring and Reform Act of 1998. So this act was passed by Congress to basically give more confidence in the population that the IRS was not out to fucking break their legs and take their money. So it basically it provides for, you can have grounds for termination if, for example, they provide a false statement under oath with respect to a material matter involving a taxpayer or taxpayer representative. Willful failure to obtain the required approval signatures on documents authorizing the seizure of taxpayers' home, personal belonging, or business assets. So
it's just more kind of plausible deniability mechanisms that they're affording themselves to mask the fact that they actually are just mafia enforcers.
Yes.
Of the oligarch class and the, basically institutionalized, monopolized force of counterfeiting that was established by the Federal Reserve and gives this mega corporate body operating as a national government under the U.S. aegis carte blanche extraordinary privilege to basically manipulate the worldwide markets through a currency reserve status that is essentially hot air.
It's dying.
Yeah.
The other thing that has got my noodle going on this is in 2015, the IRS reauthorized a private debt collection program. So basically, the IRS became so overwhelmed with the backlog that they hired a third party to basically go after delinquent returns. And I know someone who got a call from this group recently purporting to need to collect a tax debt from the IRS. And I'm thinking to myself, like, okay, when you have a consumer debt credit card and you don't pay your bill and it goes to collections, right? And they may try to collect it for a while, but then they'll sell that debt to one of these private debt collector agencies. And they do have the legal right to do that, right? Mm-hmm. But when they reach out and you oftentimes, you may not recognize the debt or whatever, you want to validate it. So and you don't recognize the name either because you never owed money to CBE Group or whatever. Who is this asking me for money? well, who borrowed the money? How much did they borrow? Can you show me the validation of the debt? Who's the original creditor here? Is it Target? Is it HSBC? Who lent the money? What's their name and address? And can you show me some accounting of how this debt was calculated? When it's tax debt, think about that. So I go out into the private sector. I create value by doing whatever I do. Farming, coffee grinding, doesn't matter. I create value. I earn dollars. And every pay period, I lend that to the government. Now, some say, no, you pay it to the government. But then I say, well, what service am I getting for that? What service of federal income tax? We talked about it before. There is none. There isn't anything that I use on a daily basis other than arguably just keeping the bubble system and the military industrial complex afloat, which I hate.
Right.
Other than that, there's nothing I enjoy from them. Don't say roads. That's the gas tax.
Right.
Don't even start with me on that. Okay, so I'm lending them money, and you lend them too much during the year based on your declarations at the beginning of the year, and so that's what the tax refund is I lent you too much, and so you owe me some. But then some people, they might have more of a liability for XYZ reason, and they say, no, you didn't pay us enough, so that's where they say you owe. But it's just crazy because I'm the original creditor.
Right.
To begin with, how did it get turned around? You work for me, I produce value, lend it to you so you can operate and do your thing, and then you're going to turn around and say that I owe you more than you already take, which I don't consent to. It's so mind-blowing, and I'm just like, where are the adults in the room?
Right.
I can't talk to anybody, peers, boomers. Very few people are willing to go that far, and they might have some sort of like acknowledgement. Yeah, it sucks. We're fucked, but they're still going to go fill it out. They're not going to fight at all, or try to find some way around it, which is legal, by the way. Tax avoidance is legal.
Absolutely, and it's just one of these deplorable scenarios where people have a sense of learned helplessness as a result of being parasited from for so long.
Right.
That it's become a habitual formation in their psychology that, oh, well, this is just the way the world works, and I've got to put in my 2 cents, and society's got to keep functioning. So people have these internal rationalization but soliloquies in them, and it's just not.
But everybody still acknowledges that the IRS is a bunch of thugs, and nobody likes them, and everybody hates tax day, and everybody thinks they're paying too much, and they think it's being wasted and being used for the wrong reasons.
Which
everybody agrees on that,
yeah.
But we can't seem to figure a way to stop it. It's just like this unstoppable
tick.
Yeah. So then this came out. It came out on the 13th. I just saw it today. Dude, look at this. If you're just listening, you got to check out the video component of this.
This could be the a massive domino effect here.
Okay. Wait till you read the details. Okay, so if you're just listening, you got to head over to Zetetic.news and check out the video component of this. I've got a Yahoo Finance article up from May 13th. IRS under fire after destroying 30 million tax documents. And get this. Think about this. The Internal Revenue Service, struggling to deal with a massive backlog of paper filings, decided to destroy an estimated 30 million paper-filed information return documents in March 2021. The IRS said in a statement Thursday that taxpayers have not been and will not be subject to penalties resulting from this action. Well, you goddamn... Is that your statement? You goddamn better not. Why should we have to suffer penalties because you destroyed all this information that you asked for?
Oh, and y'all can just destroy that many?
That's what I said to my wife. I'm like, can I destroy their documents?
Right.
If they send me mail and I destroy it, I could get a judgment against me for not even responding. But they can just do this. And of course they say the agency also said the situation reflects the significant issues posed by antiquated IRS technology. Yeah, no shit. You don't have human beings running this thing and applying the law properly. It's like we've talked about, it's a AI computer system built to like send out paper notices and scare the fucking shit out of people. And they are a huge paper tiger, in my opinion. Maybe I'll eat my words in prison someday for even having the gall to point out, their incompetence and breach of the public trust and, criminal activity. Give me a break. Like, and when do you ever see IRS people walk to jail? When did they ever get to the perp walk?
Next to never.
It's high time. And I know I've kind of beat this dead horse, but from the crypto thing and trying to understand the 1040 and the legalese issues with the color of art, and then seeing this, right? So the other thing I just wanted to bring up on the show today is it's going to seem like a bit of a segue jump, but I don't know if I have the... Oh, yeah. So, a baby formula. Okay? Just another bullet point for me. My employer already takes more than the government deserves. I don't consent to it. But if the government doesn't come knocking for any more, as long as you leave me alone, fine. There's not much I can do. That's not going to risk my job potentially. That's what many people will be thinking if they are confronted with this issue. So it's like, I'll just survive, and I'm not going to file anymore. I'll resist this, but I'm still going to get that pound of flesh extracted one way or the other. There's still other issues like real estate taxes, death taxes, inheritance taxes, all these other things that we have to figure out how to resist. But like the federal income tax is probably the biggest percentage, and it's, in my opinion, probably the easiest one that for us as a population to maybe resist and overturn. But my point with the breastfeeding is they're shipping pallets of baby formula to the border, and there are certain jurisdictions where there's empty shelves, and I'm not a proponent of baby formula. At least not the shit they sell on the shelves, but hey, it's better than nothing. They always say fed is best or whatever. Okay. But the fact that tax money is being used to send that to the border for illegal immigrants, and then Biden's promising these billions of dollars to Ukraine, and who knows what's even going on over there or where that money's even going. There's no governance over that or transparency whatsoever. And now I'm seeing anti-breastfeeding propaganda. You're just listening. I've got some of our Telegram up here where these leftards are, they are stigmatizing breastfeeding because to promote it, I guess, would be offensive. It would be offensive to promote it. It's
just basically saying that the natural lactation and breastfeeding by the mother is like another form of subjugation to the male
trying to soften
patriarchy.
They're trying to soften the criticism being waged at the Biden administration for bungling, God knows, so many different things that led to supply chain disruption. But then to see them shipping pallets of baby formula in the face of shortages within our own borders. It's an easy thing to criticize, but I guess they're trying to to temper the criticism by pointing out, some people are like, well, breastfeeding would be a good way out of this. Instead of depending on formula so much, maybe we should go back to breastfeeding. Hey, it's cheaper. It's basically free. And they're trying to stigmatize by saying, not exactly the dramatic savings people are claiming. Because some people pump and they buy pumps or they buy nursing bras or other accessories and stuff, and it's like, well, nobody said anything was free, and it's not a pro-con thing. Like, because some people prefer breastfeeding doesn't mean you can't formula. It's just kind of like, well, we have a shortage of one, but there's no shortage of milk producing boobs if you have a baby.
Well, I mean, I guess for some women have complications.
Sure.
Some babies even have complications digesting, breast milk.
That's fair.
I think that but this attempt to try to, trivialize the natural alternative as like, oh, we're modern scientific working adults now. I can't be bothered to engage in this, archaic practice anymore. I mean, I don't know. That just seems like another neurosis from the left, basically, or it's the so-called left. It's really a giant circle jerk, if you ask me.
They are so schizophrenic now. It's like, I've seen companies promoting, their endorsement of International Women's Day, and I'm like, you guys, like, you're like 10 fads behind. International Women's. Women are not a minority anymore.
You can't even have a Supreme Court justice define what a woman is.
That's the point of this. The schizophrenia is at such a feverish pitch now. There's no making sense of anything that they're saying at all. Like, and they're eating each other. They're eating their own. It's like,
right. It's like the Ouroboros. This snail or the snake eating its tail.
I knew a gay black businessman. And he told me once, being gay wasn't enough anymore. That ship has sailed. You don't get any brownie points for being gay anymore.
No, that's like, high school diploma now.
And nobody really feels bad for you to have to come out of the closet anymore. Like that's old news. Now you need to be like a quadriplegic,
trans,
non-binary,
trans species.
Actually, that brings up another really good article, which when it was posted on the...
I thought it was satire.
I was like, this has to be Babylon B.
It's just Babylon. That was it.
I actually didn't watch the clip. So let's put that on.
Oh my God.
My name is Eva Tiamat Baphomet Medusa.
Baphomet Medusa.
Also known as the Dragon Lady.
Or for short, you can call her Tiamat.
Tiamat is the Akkadian five-headed dragon.
And a legitimate question is, what is the Dragon Lady's preferred pronoun?
I really prefer to be called an it, just like a snake.
Besides transforming itself into a dragon, Tiamat is also a transsexual.
Getting rid of my male genitalia, which I haven't done yet. It's on the chopping block.
But how does one become a dragon? According to Tiamat, it's slowly, through body modification.
My first modifications towards my reptilian transformation were my horns. In the year 2000, I got my third set of horns, which is what I have now. In 2007, I got my 5 eyebrow dome implants. I have 5 dome implants, subdermal implants along each eyebrow to bring out that. I wanted to bring out my forehead and give my face a more reptilian look. My next major mod, I actually started my tattoo work. My tattoo work is going to be a full body suit patterned after the Western Diamondback rattlesnake. My next major modification, the removal of my ears. Reptiles don't have ears, and my ears needed to go. I have had 2 procedures done on my nose. The first stage was basically to reshape the nose, remove all the cartilage of my nose, remove the nostrils, and remove the septum completely, pulling the skin down and reattaching the skin to my upper lip. Now I have what is now my dragon nose, with a bigger nostril, and which are basically slits right up on both sides of my nose. And I can breathe so much easier now. I also had my tongue split.
And finally, the green eyes of a dragon. That involves dyeing the whites of the eyes. This video shows the procedure.
You can see I have green eyes now. And basically the sclera, which is the white part of my eyeballs, were stained.
Tiamat was born in 1961 as Richard Hernandez.
I was born in the suburbs of Phoenix, Arizona.
Born to a family of migrant workers who traveled with each harvest.
My mom and dad met on the fields, out in the fields, and they eloped and they were married.
But it wasn't a childhood anyone would wish for.
I think I was in the first grade when my mother and my stepdad ended up taking us down to close to where my grandparents live, actually on the property of the ranch, and abandoned myself and two of my siblings. They lived in Houston, so Houston was my first real home as a child.
After that, Tiamat says she preferred to think of her parents as reptilians.
I was born to my human mother in Phoenix, in the Phoenix area, but I was born to my reptilian parents when my mother and my stepfather abandoned me in the woods.
Young Richard was fascinated by the snakes he found in the nearby forest.
My whole transformation today is basically an honor to my reptilian parents, which are the rattlesnakes, the western diamondback in particular.
Shunned by family and friends for being openly gay,
my grandfather didn't understand that because he just didn't understand that I was not really a boy.
He left home after high school and eventually had a son.
The news went around that I was going to become a father. One of my friends came and asked me, "How did that happen?" And I said, "How do you think it happened?"
But after Tiamat was rejected by his now teenage son, it decided to make a dragon its preferred modification.
As a kid, he loved dragons, and we loved Pokemon. I'm hoping that when he sees me now, he will look at a beautiful dragon instead of seeing his father that made mistakes and was not a perfect dad.
So what kind of reaction does Tiamat get while in public? Mostly good.
People love me. I go out and I'm greeted with smiles.
But there are those times.
One lady fell out of her chair in the restaurant when she saw me and hit the floor.
And there was one memorable bus ride.
As soon as I boarded the bus, I heard a lady scream at the top of her lungs, "Oh my God! What is that? What is that?" And she put her head, "I can't see that." Okay, who wants the first one?
On this day at home in Edna, Texas, no one was scared of the dragon lady as Tiamat made cotton candy for the neighborhood kids. Their parents didn't look concerned either.
I need practice on this, don't you think so? A little more practice.
Tiamat has experienced health problems and is HIV positive.
I want to raise awareness and erase the stigma. There's so much stigma out there about being HIV positive or having AIDS, and I want that stigma to go away.
What a wonderful world.
Tiamat has documented her journey online, and reaction on social media is mixed at best.
I have been treated very badly by some people.
But Tiamat says everyone is going to have to get used to who it is.
I think humans need to be nicer to one another and to really just accept each other for what they are. This is like being in art school, isn't it?
Because for the first time in its life, this young man turned dragon lady is happy.
I'm very happy. I'm happy with my life for the first time ever. Yay!
Mark.
So what is not really covered in that vignette is that Tiamat was a high-ranking vice president at JP Morgan Chase. So when people talk about banker reptilians, you can just send them that link. It's for real.
Yeah. I mean, I there's something about being near the belly of the beast of Mammon in that capacity that must have really lent that individual quite some nasty thoughts.
I think your headphones were off at the part of the clip, but he was abandoned in the woods by his mom and stepfather. So what was weird is he saw them as reptilians, and so like became a reptile, quote unquote, in honor of them. Which I don't know why you would honor, these supposed parents that abandoned you in the woods.
A lot of psychopathological afflictions there. Yeah.
Too bad. I feel bad for him. I'm not gonna say it's a her though.
Or an it.
That report called her a her.
And
I wonder if he complained because he wants to be referred to as it, but they said her.
Well, and this goes into the whole world economic internet of bodies, internet of things. I mean, I'm sure this individual, after they've completed their scalar transformation, they'll be happy to have a chip.
Well, we had a new member of our Telegram. We're up to 36 members now. We've been hovering around 35. It's kind of gone up, and then people leave. I don't really get it because the Telegram is completely lit. Check out the link in the description. Join it. It's a great news feed. There are probably a dozen posts at least every day. It's probably our most active channel, really.
It's about, I mean, and I've, you know, we've talked about how shadow banned and crazy hidden we've become on YouTube, and the fact that, I mean, we do broadcast so infrequently so that we can keep the channel really going, essentially, because they don't have a 3-strike policy.
I was thinking of that because some of our strikes have gone away, and I was thinking to myself, you know, I would like to publish more frequently, but at the same time, doing so puts us at a censorship risk. Right. Every time we post something, and
it's crazy. I mean, I think that the writing's on the wall, that there's a massive popular rejection of this, you know, censorism within social media, that these basically highly biased political operatives with ideological allegiances within the upper echelons of these social media companies can just summarily ban people because of disagreement. I mean, that's like kindergarten level.
It's retarded. I mean, it's retarded. And I was bringing up the new member of the Telegram because they just dropped in and posted this. Maybe it wasn't the new member who posted it because it's from ZNN. But
I mean, honestly, kindergartners are typically more intelligent and compassionate. I mean, but what it basically is you say something I don't like, you gone. You hit, you hurt. You know, it's rudimentary in that sense.
It's so juvenile and haughty. Yeah. It's been funny to see them twist themselves in a pretzel with all the Elon machinations that have happened with Twitter. Like whether he's a good guy or a bad guy, it is exposing the psychosis of the left. I mean, they were the ones saying before when Twitter banned Alex Jones and Trump,
get your own platform.
It's a private company. They can do what they want. And it's like, you're so short-sighted. Like, don't you see that you're only saying that because you think you're saying what they're going to keep on their platform?
It's total recency bias.
It's ridiculous.
Yeah, it's incredible recency bias for them to say that because it's so myopic and short-term but seemingly naive in its presumption that they're just going to continue. I mean,
if Eric B. were on the broadcast right now, he would say they don't know how evil works.
Right.
They don't know how evil works. But you're talking about the sort of digital ID. This ties back to our earlier conversations about how
I mean, the IRS?
The Social Security system, they've already manufactured a language. They have literally manufactured a language which we adopt because, hey, it's hard to get yourself out of thinking that you are this straw man fiction that they've created.
I mean, the term employment and employee, employer, these are very object-oriented terms. It's not, you know, trying to take into account the living relationship, essentially, of work and labor within the human realm. It's more like you're being deployed. You're being, you know, there's an execution function, so to speak, that you're being executed in the marketplace. You're like a position, and that's really what an employee, employer, employment. That language itself is a dehumanizing, basically objectifying reduction of what is actually occurring when people, you know, have worked together, so to speak. So
right, and again, you mentioned employee. Yes, I'm employed. I work for an employer. But when you go and you look up the custom definitions of employee, it's actually limited to the performance of functions of a public office.
Exactly, and a public office is an object. It's not a person.
Right.
And that's the thing, is that they're using the post and position as their leverage to implicate all this sub silentio, hidden linguistic
and once
acquiescence.
The metaverse comes into fruition, and people are, they're working from home all the time and tied to their VR headset or whatever, the digitalization of everything, like they have already created the framework, the 1.0 version of this, going back 100 years. The enumeration at birth, the creation of the social security system. It was, what the guy's name, Ross Perot, who made his fortune basically through IBM.
Collating data
to enable the social security system to administer their system, which is a Ponzi scheme. But they needed the technology, and it's just funny to see that the IRS has to like destroy 30 million paper documents, because they don't have modern digital solutions. Okay, so this is them creating the crisis, right? To demand more money for an upgrade, a more probably a less flexible one, where you don't have as many due process rights. If it's all digital and automated now, hey, it's easy to correspond with the IRS over email. They don't have to send me expensive certified mail. There's all these staffing issues and shortages in the U.S. Postal Service too. That's part of the backlog, is the administration of what they have to do is so onerous and costly now, especially with inflation, right? They're not going to want to even use paper here pretty soon. You see all the, utility companies and stuff like providing some incentives to go paperless and stuff like that. Wouldn't the government love to go paperless too? So somebody posted this, New South Wales begins digital birth certificate program as part of the digital ID push. And I responded to that, somebody said digitized fictional, this is the new member responding to that, digitized fictional strawman indentured to the corporate fictional state, owned, trafficked, and traded by the Crown Corporation and Holy See, just in time for the metaverse. And I thought that was super poignant, because once your economic life is tied up in a virtual world, you are a digital human resource now. And there, it is a matrix. And I said, this is what it's all about. The coup against families and churches happened ages ago when they rolled out enumeration at birth, marriage licensure, social security system. Now all they have to do is update it to Web3, and Skynet is complete. Hope you tune into the show today, because we're going to be talking about this. So
no, that's an excellent point. Because honestly, the whole focus on getting people to become more plugged in from this pre-existing sort of internet system, you can kind of see it as a web, World Wide Web. Like, who's the spider?
Exactly. It's a surveillance web.
Yeah, it's a surveillance web to a great extent. So, and this is a very, I use the term Ahrimanic to sort of refer to some of Rudolf Steiner's descriptions around this sort of beast system and this sort of worldview. Because it's all about reducing and rationing individual's life itself, and kind of collapsing it into just a sort of shell of what it used to be, and gathering in all those reduced states to create a catalog, a kind of inventory of life as a counterfeit, in the same way that the reserve system essentially has a monopoly on counterfeiting. What this big data system is really angling towards is that same rationing, reducing, cataloging, and counterfeiting life, essentially. So that's the whole metaverse, the digital outlay that they're trying to push forth. And it's a counterfeit of life, in the same way that the money that we have is this sort of debt-based counterfeit note. It's all about counterfeiting, getting people to sort of acquiesce to the counterfeit government, the counterfeit corporate, U.S. entity that engages in all of this. So, I mean, I think that when you really put the pieces together, it's a conglomeration of all these different valences, all these different aspects of power. And ultimately, individuals are kind of cast within it. That we're, in a lot of ways, just awakening to the sophistication of the system on like a day-to-day basis. And it is kind of paralyzing to some extent. And I think that the solution, going back to what you were saying earlier, is really this kind of, there's a saying called the 99th monkey effect, right? There's this sort of notion that there's an etheric or
right.
telepathic capacity between living entities. And so humans, I think, have that.
Yeah.
And it's really...
I want to believe that we do. Because to think that we don't is bleak to me. Because,
because it means that we really are more like objects and less like living entities that have sort of a conscious kernel of immortal movement and recognition in the
everybody has free will, right? But that can be influenced by new information. That's an obvious statement. But I want to believe, I mean, I believe it. I feel like I know it because I've seen it in action where, take, this is going to be silly rehashing of a topic we've beat to death, but the mask thing.
Right.
Just not wearing it and not saying anything, it brings a certain energy into a place. And if you're in a place like the Durham Costco, it's palpable, the difference in energy. And some of it is bad. Like I get bad energy from people because they have perceptions of me not wearing a mask, but I also get good energy. People who might be wearing a mask, but they're encouraged by that simple act. And I can tell it triggers things in their mind. And I say that because people have come up and spoken to me about that. And I think they were encouraged. And that can only spread, it's like planting a little seed in someone's mind in a conversation. It's not necessarily going to yield fruit that very day, but,
it's a good point.
We have an innate ability, I think, to transmit information. The question is how much of that is purely at the thought level versus how much of it needs to come from your physical action, saying something, writing something, blah, blah, blah. I think if anything, the thought component, it's an underutilized, it's let's just say in the current state of the current collective psyche, using that as your primary method of impact is going to be much more difficult than actually taking up physical action. But if we were a more enlightened society, perhaps we would just have to resonate a certain way and emit a certain sort of thought pattern, and it would be more easily picked up on through the it's funny, they call it Ethernet. The Ethernet. Like an Ethernet cable. Isn't that interesting? I just thought of that. Ethernet.
Yeah. And I think that's really referring to exactly...
It's really Electronet, because they use copper wires now, but a true Ethernet would be in the ether.
Right.
Which is what the whole 100th monkey syndrome type thing is alluding to, is that there is a non-verbal, non-sonic, non-light sort of realm where, and that's where thought, that's where consciousness comes from, right? How do we influence things at that level?
Right. And this, provides a kind of glimpse into what is possible versus what has been resorted to, what's just been sort of the accepted norm. And I'm not like an advocate of like violent overthrow and revolution, guys. Like let's. But
at a certain point,
but at a certain point, there's there's a need to assert a certain kind of independence, right? There's a need to assert.
Yeah, I don't think taking the day off to go bomb a federal building is going to yield any kind of progress.
Or shoot up a grocery store or something like that.
No. But, like, you do have a right to self-defense, and I've thought this one through as well. Like, under what circumstances does the government have the right to come and extract me from my house and take my property? Can these paper notices really get so out of hand and the government say that I owe them so much money that I'm actually taken to jail and my house taken from me, my place where I live and work taken from me because I supposedly owe the national government an exorbitant amount of money? How did we get in and would they actually do that? And if so, like, under what circumstances does a person have the right to defend themselves from said action? That's another interesting point too, because like there are laws around debt collection, and if you get a call from the debt collector at your place of work and your work doesn't want you to be taking personal calls during work, they're not allowed to call you there. They're not allowed to show up at your place of work. Well, what if you work from home?
Right.
Right. Are they really going to? They're going to come and take you from your place of work, take your home, and put you in prison. Like, I thought debtor prisons were made illegal by the Constitution.
Right.
How did we get into this?
Well, it's theme variation recapitulation. I mean, in the theme of tyranny recapitulates pretty frequently because it variates, and we've gotten this sort of parasitic order incrementally over time. So it's grown and it's faked being of a symbiotic variety. Oh, this is a duly elected, transparent constitutional republic, and we've got fair elections, and we're gonna make sure that every vote counts, and blah blah blah. This sort of veiled need to make sure everyone's on board, right, is in itself a sign that it's not a symbiotic voluntary order that's trying to establish a wise treasury and councilship, over a certain village or township or what have you. That it's actually the residue of various forms of tyranny that have been with us for eons, and that is really oligarchical collectivism or elite-run mafioso extraction and force majeure systems, and that theme is now recapitulating today. But there's also the theme of independence, right? And maybe we're caught in a weird variation now while tyranny recapitulates, that we're trying to gauge the seduction of its surveillance technologies, its computer processing systems, its allocation type cataloging of resources and life, while trying to simultaneously realize all the kinds of freedoms and liberties that have been lost along the way in considering this system. So I wonder if there was a kind of decentralization of these various technological developments, how much more they could probably be a cause for liberation as opposed to consolidation or conglomeration within this Borg beast system. I think it may.
I think if we go back to this article, where they're desperately trying to destroy, 30 million documents backlog. They notoriously short-staffed, not able to keep up with the refunds. They're, at the same time, they wield enormous power, but they are also powerless because of their own largesse, and they're probably still using Ross Perot era technology, 1992 technology. So if we don't allow the digital framework to continue, and there is between now and when those things are so readily accessible that anybody can tap into them, between now and then, if we have a collapse of the traditional system, I think it is possible that there are just so many different options available to people. The centralized form of governance that we've grown to know will be rendered like impossible administratively to take its same form. That's my hope anyways. I think the decentralization, this decentralized finance, the invention of crypto, it could throw a major kink in their ultimate plans to centralize and consolidate all the data that they're collecting in a way that is easily utilized to achieve their goals. And you look at some of the biggest companies in the world with respect to data: Facebook, Twitter, Google. Even they have enormous data quality problems, deficiencies, and inabilities to really implement this sort of single pane of glass 360 view of you. They have enormous trouble with that when you're talking about the scale of billions of people. And who's the government going to get to run it better than Google or Facebook? You know what I'm saying? They would have to contract those organizations to even try to do as good a job as they do with that kind of thing.
Sure.
So it's kind of like when Obamacare came out. They're like, oh, we got a website up. Go enter your information. Who got anything from that?
Nothing.
All you get is more information gathering on your employment forms.
Yep.
You pay tax. Like, they implemented a new tax. So, like, if you don't have health insurance.
Yeah, which is a subsidy on pre-existing private providers. Yeah.
Unbelievable.
Yeah, it's
but that was a whole data boondoggle. Like it was a simple, clean website that some probably grad student applied for, had an internship, and then went, oh yeah, you can do this, and you go into but where did your information go, and how was it administrated, efficiently? They can't run shit, and that's kind of we're at a major crossing point, because a crossroads of sorts, because they can't do business as they have done and accomplish these kind of goals without cleaning up the administrative burden of it. It's just too much. And so they might be destroying themselves with the largesse that they have enjoyed.
That's a good point, because if you look at the rise in administrative positions over time and the costs associated with those same services, they're almost a 1-to-1 correlation. And if fundamental business is to get back to a actually affordable baseline or an average, the mass layoffs could really start to take place.
So let's talk about this as well, this huge conundrum of staff shortages everywhere. It seems like everywhere seems to be hiring, but then you talk to people that we can't get work.
Right.
What is going on here? So me and my wife just found out that the birth center,
oh my God,
is basically, it's like the only out of hospital birthing center for hundreds of miles. There was one in a nearby city a bit further away, Baby and Company. They closed because business became hostile in North Carolina due to some incidents, which some alleged was malpractice.
Oh my gosh.
Babies died unfortunately as a result, and their reputation just tanked. Even though babies die all the time at the hospital,
Sure.
and of course we're in the business of killing babies all the time. Unfortunately that organization closed. So the only other one was in Chapel Hill, right? Women's Birth and Wellness Center. It's been around since like 89 or 90 or something. Well, after COVID, everything just fell apart. It's like, we're going to do telehealth. So, morale is low. Who knows what they were recommending as far as vaccines at the time, but people left, and I heard that, the founder of the birth center, she retired and then she died. So they brought in this new executive director who's just like an LGBT diversity, equity, and inclusion wrecking ball. Basically came in, painted all the walls,
murals,
took all the murals down, all the like folk art with like womb art and stuff like that. They had a plaster of Paris pregnant woman with like jewels and signatures and stuff like that. All that was gone. They painted the walls all like drab gray. They're still doing all this telehealth shit, which I guess it's optional. You can come in or not, but they're still requiring masks, even though the mandates have been dropped. So and now, like, just to encapsulate how insane it is right now. We've delivered one child there before, so my wife is already a patient here. We got a third coming. When she goes in to get intake for the third, she fills out a new form. They ask her for her legal gender assigned at birth, and gender identity. And I'm like, hold on a second.
Clearly a female patient.
This is not only clearly a female patient. Dude, it's called the Women's Birth and Wellness Center. Who is going there besides a woman who is going to give birth or has given birth? And I'm like, what the fuck is this? This is not a good sign. No. Okay, so there was low morale. They like promoted the head midwife to a directorship role, and she was trying to like hold on to some of these things. Well, they wanted, we're trying to focus on primary care, and I'm thinking, what the fuck is primary care if it's not birth care for people who want to give birth? Like, what am I saying? You mean women?
Right.
Anyways, I guess this director of the midwifery just came head clashing with this diversity, equity, and inclusion agenda, and she was escorted off the property. So all the allied midwives were like, well, we were going to work our 90 days out, but you're firing her? What? We're gone. So they don't even have the staff to satisfy all the birth contracts that they signed.
Oh my god.
So this is just like I just tell this story not only to expose the crazy LGBTQ bullshit.
Well, this is part of the new religion. This is part of the new age.
But it's
one
like
world
wokeism
religion.
is destroying everything. Like it's making it not a good place to work there. You're clinicalizing everything and trying to make everything equitable, which happens to be a drab form of gray.
Exactly. Just like the form of so-called forced diversity that they want isn't unique individuals, subcultures working together. It's actually just a giant, like, Play-Doh ball of mush. I think we've had an amazing meme. They're really kind of epitomizes
Pull
that.
it up again. I'm pretty sure it's
There we go. Oh, there we go. Yep. That's now basically you can replace the idea of equity, right, with this notion of like restorative justice, right? So it's kind of like the idea of equity is good, but the multicultural aspect of this restorative justice stuff is actually just kind of vengeance politics at the end of the day.
Have you seen all the criticisms about Fox News promoting white replacement theory and all this.
Oh, which is like, it's
like-
so they
so
have this
obvious-
double think position now
Yeah.
where they have to disavow it if it's coming out of the mouth of someone they don't like. Well, they have to simultaneously support it and applaud it if it's coming out of the mouth of someone that is,
So like we have to
kosher.
celebrate the Muslims who are invading various parts of Europe and saying out loud, we're gonna conquer by breeding with you people and getting everybody to look like us and be what is that? Is it? That's not my white replacement theory. That's their white replacement plan.
But meanwhile, Israel can have a wall and have the most vetted,
Yeah. So
society.
I found it funny. I should have taken a screenshot and posted it on the Instagram. We have a couple of like little educational games installed on this tablet, and from time to time the kids will play it. And it's like a virtual classroom and stuff. We can do different things. And on the front screen when we pulled it up today, it was like Asian American and Pacific Islander American Heritage and Appreciation Month, and then it swiped, and then it said Jewish American Heritage Month. Oh. And I'm just like, you will never see a White History Month or a white
European and ancestral European.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
Nothing like that.
Like, how about some
or
recognition?
Settler Appreciation
I was going to say,
Month,
I have family that goes back to the Sisters of the Revolution, people who were here in the 1600s. Am I not an indigenous American? I am indigenous to this this region. I mean, who's going to say I'm not? How far back does that line go before we get to say it's because when you talk about
Swatch gang comes in,
when you talk about the Native Americans, of course we covered this as well. Is it even true to say they're native? Yeah, they're native relative to the Europeans who came over at that particular time, but there's a lot of evidence to suggest that
they were here much longer before then.
And red-haired giants,
right?
And even the Native Americans have talked about various skeleton mounds and burial grounds going before their time. So
that's right. So we don't know.
Native is kind of a subjective thing.
It absolutely is. Absolutely it is. And I think that the sort of tangent there to sort of bring it back around is it's the same thing with the tax code, right? This notion of a tax for the operations of the society, is a noble intention, but beneath it is all these toxic incentives. And that's why corporations, for example, offshore large amounts of their money so they don't have to participate in the extraction process of the tax system. So that shows you right there that the system itself knows that it's parasitic.
Sure.
It's because they allow the biggest players to get away with not paying any taxes.
Right. 100%.
So I mean that's
it's
just
a big club.
It's a big
and
club.
You ain't in it.
And the tax system is there to guarantee basically bailout ability of those very same non-tax paying big players.
It's so upside down. And
Fabian socialists,
to see,
Wall Street socialism.
pallets of money going over to Ukraine, to see pallets of baby formula going to the border, to see, here's a good one, a UNC School of Dentistry, which that's a state institution, by the way, so you could say this is state money where
state propaganda.
They're going to be recruiting parents willing to sacrifice their 2-month to 6-month-old baby to be fed fluoridated bottled water so that they can fabricate a study to show that it prevents cavities, and this will be used certainly for future propaganda by the School of Dentistry. Isn't that awful? And look at this logo. They put a bottle of water and then a tooth. Like, why don't you put the baby's head there? Because you're not just applying it to the tooth. You are drinking the fluoride. Feeding it to the baby.
Yeah.
And this is the same school, UNC, that basically created COVID.
Yep.
If COVID is even a
physical thing,
that is really going to threaten you.
Oh, but even if it isn't, the UNC has been absolutely instrumental in concocting
the propaganda story around
fearology and the exactly.
Yeah. So shifting gears a little bit, we've Still got about an hour and 15 minutes.
Oh, nice.
I did want to shift gears. This is one of the things that I really wanted to touch on because it's another reason why you guys should join the Telegram, because I didn't post this on the Zetetic.news site. I didn't put it on YouTube. It was only posted in Telegram. So you might say it's a ZNN Telegram exclusive report, our very first of its kind. I'm having a little bit of trouble finding it now.
That is the one thing about Telegram is it's
not the best.
Sorting function is really underdeveloped.
Yeah. But what I wanted to do it this way. Well, sorry guys, I'm gonna find it. I can't find it. I did a special report from the City of Durham's Museum of Life and Science, where they have a space exhibit. I'm trying to think of what to...
Ooh.
Frustrating.
Was it? I'm trying to remember which one it was.
That's the one where they have a model of the lunar lander.
Oh yes.
And then I go over and take a picture of that little plaque.
That was about it was about a month ago.
Yeah, let's just go back to the channel. Let me put some music on while I try to find this puppy. We only got 2 viewers in YouTube, unfortunately, right now. No callers. What's up, people?
Well, I mean, maybe some people are still at work and whatnot.
I think we should.
We had good attendance on the last daytime show, but I'm gonna find it, guys. Hold up.
feel like you're close.
It's killing me.
Searching for a better way to collaborate with your team? Try Miro, an online whiteboard made for teamwork. Everyone's welcome, from project managers to product managers, designers, developers, agile coaches, and consultants. Get the whole team together in real time on Miro's infinite canvas. Use your Miro board however you like, for online workshops and project planning, or brainstorming and ideation sessions. There's a template tailor-made for your needs. Whether you're in the office, working with a fully remote
Just relax, amigo. You want to talk? We'll talk. I'm a sucker for good conversation.
I don't want to talk to you. Are you bringing the television cameras in here now? Come on, bring it in.
Can't do that.
Why?
I don't deal with psychos. I put them away.
require the solace of the shadows and the dark of the night. Sunshine is my destroyer. There shall never be another dawn. Looking upon these frail creatures, one would not think that they could contain such power. One could rule the universe with it. You must find them for me and destroy them!
really don't want to sell Theta to do that, because to me that's like a longer term. Like I can just continue to earn from doing that and compounding the Tfuel. Who knows how much we'll need to consume in the future as part of the operation. So I had stopped accumulating Theta a while back. I was buying $6, but most of it
Right. Sweet.
I'm in a lot of the money post the initial buy. Most 117,000 of it is from poker. So he gave me
Because of Bitcoin,
so I traded that in 2018 for 117,000.
And it's still up,
yeah,
300%.
So any loss I experienced in the liquidity pool, it's more than made up.
Right.
Whatever monies I've put in after that, so I'm probably in the red for a lot of purchases, accumulations, but I don't regret that or feel bad about it. It's kind of funny because, like, according to the tax logic, applying capital gains, I've probably lost a lot of that. Actual dollar value.
Exactly.
But then that's the other crazy thing is, like, they want to say, we're live, sorry, we're just chatting offline here while we get back in the saddle here. Sorry we couldn't find the clip that I was looking for. Hopefully, if you're still listening, you're enjoying the cyber beats. But yeah, I was talking about the crypto markets and our investments in the Theta network and liquidity pools, DeFi, the crypto route, everything that's happening. But yeah, I was saying, tying back to our Silentio, whole IRS discussion, if I'm to believe these so-called tax professionals, okay, I traded a Bitcoin that I was given as a wedding gift in 2015 for 100-some thousand Theta tokens in 2019. They want me to believe that I owe the IRS a capital gain tax on both the Bitcoin, so the value realized between when it was given to me as a gift, even though they don't really know when it was handed to me. I didn't even access it on a wallet until 2019, so he could have had access to it. He gave me it on a piece of paper. Okay. Wild. And so I'm supposed to pay a tax on the gain between $280 Bitcoin and like 10,000 Bitcoin. Jeez. And then so I swapped into Theta, and then who knows, 10 years down the road I sell the Theta for $10 million.
Right.
How much do I owe you now?
Right.
For that? Even though it wasn't even a dollar-based asset.
Right.
I never even owned any of it as a dollar. I never spent a single dollar on that amount.
Right.
It came from the Bitcoin that he had purchased who knows when and for how much.
Right.
And now I guess these things have a timestamp on the blockchain, and you can get forensic analysts to go in but where's your jurisdiction to assign a dollar value to that asset at some past point and then claim I have realized? I mean, it's just so insane that people are falling into line here and just reporting this kind of information.
Meanwhile, the big insiders can be bailed out to the tune of hundreds of billions, trillions of dollars, and they have next to no tax liability because they know how to surf the sea, so to speak.
Yeah, maritime.
Sea.
Yeah, that's right.
Admiralty system.
Good point. So I know we beat the IRS horse a lot. I don't think it's dead yet, but let's beat it some more.
Seriously, because, and then if you look at it just as an acronym, like IRS, you just put the S in front and it's Sir.
Well, that's the thing.
They're our Lord.
Service. Who are you serving exactly? You find out the IRS is like a foreign corporation. They're not even incorporated within the constitutional United States.
Oh, no.
But I want to switch gears a little bit. We took a bit of a hiatus. I was trying to find a clip that's on our Telegram somewhere. But if you were watching us scroll through that, you can get a sense for not only how much content there is, but
a lot,
how rich the content is. I mean, it covers the full spectrum, everything from like the straw man issues we're talking about to lost history, lost art. Art appreciation, architecture,
Cartographic censorship, taxes and lawfare, geopolitics, microeconomics, crypto economics, all sorts of different stuff there. But the thing I was trying to find was a special report I did just a minute or so when I was at the nearby Durham, North Carolina Museum of Life and Science, where they had a former curator of the Air and Space Museum. He came in the 60s and was like, let's get all this space shit and show, this will be a little exhibit, and I used to go here as a kid on field trips, and they would take us through, and it was just so cool to see, like, they've got the lunar lander model, they've got the what's the other thing, the little capsule that supposedly was parachuted into the Pacific Ocean and all this stuff. And I went there recently with my kids, and of course things have deteriorated a little bit, that things are showing their age and a little bit dusty and stuff like that. But for the most part, everything is as it was when I was 8-9 years old or whatever. But now that I have realized that the moon landing was a total fabrication and probably a propaganda operation to get people to believe a certain conception of their realm and where they're at, it's a very different experience to go in and see a space exhibit, And I like Eddie Bravo's treatment of the subject. He calls it space porn, and he was just so into space. He'd watch space documentary after space documentary. But if you guys are in the retard Triangle Park area, that's a good one.
Please take a moment to stop by and see the space exhibit and just ask yourself, did this thing really land on the moon? Because in the video, it looks even worse and more ridiculous than the pictures I'm showing right now from Google Images. Literally like construction paper, duct tape, childlike construction. And I just don't understand. We have alloys, we have electroplating, we have all sorts of advanced machining capabilities. I've seen it on West Coast choppers and all,
right.
Pimp My Ride. But somehow the billions of dollars of the best and brightest NASA engineering is wrapping this thing in foil. I mean, for God's sakes, like, I know we've covered this before, but why? Does it not need to be aerodynamic because it's 1/6 the gravity and there's no atmosphere, so it's not going to tear the foil off? It's like y'all literally taped it up there. Look at this wrinkled construction paper, and what looks. I mean, seriously, look at this. If I paid a roofer to roof my house and he showed me some dented shit like this, I would either ask him to redo it or fire him. And this is the best engineering that we have to offer. It's absolutely absurd. And the thing that was amazing, unfortunately I cannot find it in our Telegram because there's just so much content there, but there was also this little plaque next to the exhibit at the museum, and it had this little factoid or whatever. It was like, did you know the Apollo 13 lander or whatever, during their visit, they left 66 bags of excrement, human excrement, on the moon. And you
laughing in your face.
And what did you think when you saw that?
I was
little
like,
plaque?
God, I mean, it's just such an obvious yarn to insult your intelligence and to obviate even more, perhaps even subconsciously, people who report that or relayed that from back in the day. I mean, it's very obviously a mockery operation.
66 bags of poop. What do you think of the numerology behind that?
Yeah, very obvious. Very obvious.
Masonic,
geometric, Kabbalistic, mark of significance, mark of Renfran and the beast. And, it's an obvious fake cosmology that they were pushing with that. I mean, we honestly don't even know the distance to any of the luminaries in the sky. Don't. Because perhaps they aren't actual physical places and orientations that we can locate. And red light flickers and, using a axiomatically presumed speed of light that was never verified by any experiment. I just think that all of the distantiation mechanisms of space and this purported distances to things are ways of just boggling the mind and soul into a feeling of insignificance and insubstantiality.
Mm-hmm.
And ultimately it's just like trickery of the mind, right? There's no way to forensically empirically verify any of their projections about anything.
Yeah, and another video that was posted in the Telegram was this debate between Professor Dave and Flat Earther David Weiss.
It was unfortunate.
And I'm not going to obviously play the whole clip. It's an hour long. It's really not...
It's not very instructive,
valuable or
informative.
constructive.
It's just more divide and conquer, sort of globy versus flatty, just bollocks.
I think David Weiss his heart is in a good spot, and he makes good points, and he's not necessarily the worst kind of like, I don't want to say spokesman, but I think he doesn't embarrass the flat Earth community, like quote unquote flat Earth community. It's a very diverse community of people who don't all subscribe to one sort of idea of conception of how things are, but he doesn't offend me or my sensibilities with sort of the points or questions that he brings up. To me, it's still couched in a sense like of questioning the globe and putting the burden of proof on the proponents of the globe, the claimers, to prove their claim. I think it's a better, more honest viewpoint to be like, well, we don't really know how things are, but we know what it's not. And
right.
Professor Dave is just the most condescending, elementary, juvenile.
Well, I mean, he's clearly a narcissist. I mean, the guy thinks
calls
so
himself Professor
highly
Dave
of himself, and I mean, he's just kind of a schmuck.
He doesn't even entertain questioning of ideas. All he does is ridicule and belittle.
All he's doing is leveraging the pre-existing programmed ignorance of people watching this fucking thing.
He thinks he's just putting on an entertaining YouTube show by quote humiliating him. Honestly, I watched most of this. I think he's the one who needs to feel humiliated. I mean, not just by his candor and his way of speaking to another human being, but also in his clear closed-mindedness and inability to
complete appeal to authority on everything. I mean, he was riddled with all kinds of fallacies and false reductios, and he's just putting on a show because he's leveraging the pre-existing audience bias towards the issue,
right?
And it's like, okay, so that allows you to sort of behave like a dick, because you're acting that role.
Yeah.
I just was. It was unfortunate because nothing of substance was really
garnered.
Covered.
Yeah.
Unfortunately.
Yeah, he didn't allow that to happen. I don't think that was the kind of thing that he wanted to put on. Unfortunately, I think he came prepared to ridicule and belittle, and there was no honest meeting of the mind. Like he wasn't going to concede a certain point. David Weiss wasn't really making a whole lot of claims. He was more asking for verification, the evidence of, and of course when you do that, it just drives the globetards insane because they're like, what do you mean evidence? We have pictures,
right?
Redshift photography,
right?
And then like you start asking questions about redshift and it's like, you don't even know what you're talking about with redshift. You're a fucking idiot. Don't you know how it works? And it's like,
that's called gatekeeping.
If you know how it works, why don't you explain how you can derive all this information from redshift photography from the surface of the Earth, which is, according to your model, billions and billions. I mean, how do you get the resolution you need on what something is made of when it's so far away with the...
It's like the multiple choice is A, make a bunch of shit up, B, make some different other kinds of shit up, or C, claim we just don't have enough information. And clearly the most intelligent answer is C. You just don't have enough information.
Well, it's funny because on the sort of dogmatic religious side, when you question far enough, you get an answer like, well, that's the mystery of our faith. You get the same thing on the science side.
Absolutely.
Where you get far enough in your line of inquiry 100%. And we get to the point where, well, we're trying to find out. We don't know everything.
Yeah, everything is just a matter of relative probability.
Mm-hmm.
You know, we know about 99.9% about this, and you know, maybe 84.3 about this subject, and it's just artificial gobbledygook, fake epistemology.
Yeah. One thing that stuck out to me about that Dave and Dave debate was the focus of the redshift photography and how he just, you know, redshift, end all be all, that's how we know. And Dave Weiss asking questions, well, you know, you need a container to actually, you know, you need to isolate these elements to be able to like derive what they are with a redshift camera. And, you know, that's on a micro scale. We're talking about supposedly millions and millions of miles away. And he's like, you don't know how this shit works, blah, blah, blah. And it's like, well, what about the cameras and lasers that everybody knows how it works? We know how magnifying glass works, and that disproves the globe.
Right.
You know? And it's like, well,
this is divergent
we can defer
right?
to the authority of redshift
yeah.
cameras, but we can't defer to the authority of regular optical photography cameras.
Right. So it's more just a appeal to authority or presumed authoritative opinion. It's basically expertocracy, courtiers reply fallacies. Yeah. That's very common. I mean, you kind of see the opposite in, or not the opposite, but on the other sort of end of the spectrum, like when you question, you know, document veracity of like the New Testament, for example. It's always answered with, well, you know, the church has so much history, it can't be built from, you know, mythologies.
Right. It's
like, oh, well, that's a pretty hardy assumption there. You know, so at any rate, there's that within all religions. There's some sort of mythical core that appeals to our primordial sense of self and immortal, you know, aspirations, and that is just inborn within the human psyche and consciousness, because we have the ability to survey time with memory, and thus, of course, the conception of immortality is something that's primordial, goes back beyond time and recorded history. So what you're really dealing with is an appeal to that innate soul desire and aspiration, that primordial sensibility for immortality. And that's true for all religions, whether it's, you know, Hinduism and Buddhism appealing to reincarnation and Maya and the cycle of souls, or the transmigration of souls. Judaism with, you know, Gilgul and, like, you know, the reoccurring intergenerational struggle that happens every generation, and, you know, the march towards Zion. And
it's
all
hard
that
to
stuff,
think
you know,
about not existing.
Right. Well, that and also trying to glean accurate data as to what would constitute supersensibility or subsensibility, right? That's a perfectly acceptable purview, you know, metaphysically, supernaturally. It's just, it is very hard to repeat, test, demonstrate, replicate, and it's not evidence of the fact that it doesn't exist. It's just evidence that there's kind of a paucity of methodologies to extract knowledge about something like a spiritual world or an immortal etheric realm, right? Which you know, again, you know, absence of evidence is not evidence of absence,
right?
But by the same token, it does show that maybe our current existential frameworks and our frames of reference around information and data through the senses, and then the ability to grok all that information with, concepts and percepts that may be so much more limited than we're lending it credence to be.
For sure.
And I think that's probably the most likely explanation, is that our senses really can only pick up a certain frequency of information, and reducing all information to those frequencies is actually short-circuiting our potential as a being or a conscious entity.
Well, you talk often of the concept of an egregore.
Yes.
And we've talked a lot during this show about the words of art and how they create a certain thought form. All of that needs to be examined and reevaluated, how we interact with these thought forms. And
right.
That's what I think, becoming sovereign and independent is all about, is not accepting other people's definitions of things without clarifying it. And
right.
Because they have enormous impact on how we continue through this experience that we're having.
Right.
And it can be the difference between, path A and path B.
Right.
These sort of things, how you interpret the information, process it, and then react to it. I mean, these are not issues to be taken lightly. And that's why I think hopefully our show is a exposure, sort of like reverse engineering of these things, at least to give people that push, like, hey, your time is limited here, and whether you will reincarnate or you will cease to exist or you will go into sort of like a transliminal state for some period of time, regardless, the time is short cosmologically. We know that, maybe we should be inhabiting these physical bodies for a longer period of time. Perhaps we can,
right.
But if we accept the idea, and that's why I want to play Prince, because he says before he played Purple Rain, he's like, I don't count my birthdays. He's like, it's a trap. He's like, you only get older if you count them.
Right.
And I'm just like, oh shit, he was awake, man. Like,
yeah,
it's how much of getting older is you believing that,
sure.
And monitoring that and tracking it and obsessing over it.
Right.
Just a change of mind can be a change of destiny. I guess it's kind of what I'm getting at. So
I know, and I think that is a kind of active solution. And
it's the solution to sub silentio suicide.
Yes.
How's that for alliteration?
Right. That's a good one. It was really a change of mind towards sovereignty, but in this autarchical fashion of having a moral imagination about the import of one's deeds, right, and creating your own cosmology, essentially, to an extent, in terms of a cosmology of meaning.
Well, when you really embrace some of the founding document, like words that supposedly our government was founded upon, just government is government by consent, and then, oh shit,
right,
it's up to me to agree with it or not. What is the level of tyranny? It's the level you'll accept.
Right.
So I've taken that to heart for sure.
Yeah, I think that is a psychological, cultural.
You got to flip that switch.
Yeah. And that's where the genuine revolution is. I think is on a psychocultural.
Alex Jones does the best job of
epistemological level,
getting people angry, because I think the apathy is harder to deal with than like the schizophrenic leftist. Apathy is harder to deal with, I think, because we can disregard some of those crazy people, and then we can try to influence others who, it's like the opposite of love is not hate, it's apathy.
Right.
And if someone's apathetic, it's very hard to motivate them one way or the other. And I think Alex Jones does a really good job of getting people out of that apathy by expressing his rage, because a lot of people feel that rage, but they don't want to express it because they won't, it won't necessarily benefit them to do that. It won't get them anywhere, so to speak. But I think people do need to feel that and like go through that feeling of like disgust and anger and upset, because you have been attacked. You are being attacked. You are
constantly being stolen from.
I mean, and so you should be mad about that. And, it's the fight or flight. You either run away from the fight or you go to the fight and you have the fight. And I don't think they're leaving us much choice in the matter. They're coming to us, and so we have to react. And I just want to play this quick clip because it's just another little bullet.
It's just a perfect Freudian slip.
Okay, and it goes in the category of things that underscore the point that this so-called government, which you're supposed to consent to be governed by, they are your enemy. They are spitting in your face. They whatever you want. They hate you. They want to kill you. Like, look at this joker.
In contrast, Russian elections are rigged. Political opponents are imprisoned or otherwise eliminated from participating in the electoral process. The result is an absence of checks and balances in Russia, and the decision of one man to launch a wholly unjustified and brutal invasion of of Ukraine.
They laugh.
75. 75.
Who would laugh at that?
In contrast,
somebody who goes to the George W. Bush Institute. I mean, wow.
It's incredible Freudian slip there.
And I mean, I honestly don't know why anybody would go to see this man speak. And I don't know why he's not in prison. But I mean, what if he's on a war crimes tribunal? You play this clip because he's clearly projecting his own
guilt.
Scenario, his own guilt. That's a confession essentially to that he used unilateral power to launch a brutal invasion of Iraq, and wasn't Saddam installed there to begin with,
by his dad or something?
God knows. And this is where we're at, people. I've just been sort of despondent over the last few weeks at just how this kind of stuff just bomb after bomb after bomb of them projecting, blaming others for the thing they're guilty of, denying what they are bragging about and announcing. Like, did you see Jen Psaki deny the, sort of like brush aside all the questions about the Department of Homeland Security's, like the Ministry of Truth, basically.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. That's not happening, even though we announced it. We hired this total nutball.
Right. Oh no, we're just expanding a already unconstitutional lesion on the side of the budget called the Department of Homeland Security.
Right.
Oh no, that's all. There's nothing wrong with that.
That just shows you
this is the protection
these
that you pay
bureaus
for with
once they
IRS and
get
taxes.
funding, they never shrink.
Ever.
They always grow and try to seek more power and control and influence, and
until they are just completely defunded and their offices turned into shops.
Yeah.
I mean, I feel like that's the kind of, we need like a super strong economic revolution.
A revival.
And yeah, just a massive, just Wild Westification against government to a great extent.
Yeah.
And a reassertment of just actual autonomous marketplace.
Yeah, and it's mind blowing to just realize, you know, are we millennials?
According to whatever contrived date rubric,
most millennials.
It's supposed to be 1980 onwards, so I guess technically
we're all born into this. scenario. A lot of stuff has already gone down. Okay. Talked about the coup against the families in the churches with enumeration and all the social surveillance system, the credit score system, all that. But like the whole industry, the economy, it's been rigged for so long. I went to visit a relative recently in Martinsville, Virginia, and I was mind blown by this fact I learned. So he's telling me about his family's history there, blah, blah, blah. Did you know my grandma, she got Employee of the Year at this textile factory for making the most towels, that quarter or year, whatever. And I was like, that's awesome. He showed me like a newspaper article. Right. And I got curious about the industry because you go through there, it's like hollowed out. All the government buildings look really nice. The roads are paved real nice, but there's no factories there anymore. There's no textile industry. There's no furniture making, which Martinsville was huge for.
Right.
And so I'm like, just curious, naturally. Proceed by inquiry, niggas. And I start researching Martinsville and trying to understand. Well, after World War, like all this factory was just like installed there during World War II. So you see the direction of like money and funds. That textile industry might have manifested a completely different way if that that capital was not directed to that area during, to make wartime goods at that time. So then there was this legacy infrastructure there, textiles, that got repurposed after World War II. And, for many people, they had very nice quality of life during that time because they were actually making things like towels and stuff instead of like gauze or whatever, for the wartime effort. And for a good period of time post World War II, that was a very prosperous area.
Right.
And the thing that stuck out to me on the Wikipedia was in the 90s, it was considered to be the t-shirt capital, the sweatshirt capital of the world. And they boasted that they had more per capita millionaires than any city on earth in Martinsville, Virginia. And I'm just thinking to myself, wow, the sweatshirt capital of the world. So is this like residual World War II infrastructure investment at the tail end of its life cycle?
Wow.
We're making promotional sweatshirts and there's tons of like short-term millionaires who like profited from that. Now the industry's like basically gone. They're not a furniture manufacturer because all the Chinese, they came and bought up all that infrastructure. And so now it's hollowed out. The average yearly income there is like $35,000 a year.
Yeah.
And so it's just mind blowing to like, be born into, like I said, so much has already gone down, and it is up to us to like rebuild it and bring it back. But how much of it is, the development of that capital, that initial capital that was invested in all of that infrastructure, where is it? We don't have that capital anymore.
Well, because look at what's happened to the debasement of the dollar.
Right.
Since the inception of the Federal
And we
Reserve.
have a government just parasiting us to death.
Yeah.
And so I produce value selling goods and services. I am taxed on that value that I produce, and there's a debate whether I might even owe more than what they take off the top. I'm forced to put like 12% into Social Security. They're called taxes, but it's supposed to be a retirement fund for me.
Right.
I'd rather the money just go into an escrow account that I can't touch because it'd probably be more valuable than the Ponzi. Anyways, I'm forced to do that. Then what I'm left with, I go to the store and buy a good that someone else produced, and I have to pay the state another 7% for that. Then what I save, I invest it in a asset, and then they say, well, if you gain from that, you owe us 35 or 30%. And I'm just like, this is not sustainable. This is antagonistic to the constituent. It is not fruitful for the constituent. I'm not getting anything in return. I'm taxed on, I go and I save my money, I buy property. Now I rent my property from the local county municipal government who's providing LGBTQ propaganda to students that aren't even my kids. And I don't have any say in the matter. Where is my consent? You buy a house, you
have to contribute to this indoctrination program.
You went through a loan application. Don't you have to basically consent to paying the taxes of that jurisdiction when you sign up for the loan?
Essentially, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, which is like, oh, no, how about not? Because that's the thing. You know, depending on the state, there are some states that don't have property taxes.
Correct.
That's certainly true. Those are, you know, becoming more
desirable.
But I think that it's possible to undo some of the revenue extraction, you know, budgeteering, I like to call it, by the state. Well, we need X many amount of dollars to sustain our budget. It's like, okay, well, your budget is derived off of extraction in the first place. So,
right.
So,
who's the original creditor?
Who's the original creditor? And two, why don't we seek a second opinion? Like, can we just privatize, like, maybe, I don't know, 98%?
Well, that's another huge fraud
and save literally 80%.
That's another huge fraud, is the whole budget thing altogether.
Yeah,
so city comes out, they say we have a budget of X amount of dollars, and that budget is based on what they want to spend. It's not based on what they have or what they think they're going to get.
Right.
They budget less than they ultimately need so that they can say we have a budget shortfall, we need more money. But they have the money,
and they overspend on
it's never
BS.
Referenced in the budget.
Right.
That's in a different report called the Comprehensive Annual Financial Reports, and they don't really talk about those. If they did, everybody would realize that their cities are exorbitantly wealthy off because they basically extorted all this tax money and they've put it into yielding assets, sometimes stocks, other vehicles, real estate. They have enormous amounts of wealth, and that wealth compounds. So when they say we have a budget shortfall, they just basically want to extort more money from the population, they're fabricating, you know, one would say sub silentio.
Right.
They're fabricating the need for additional tax revenues when that's just a fraud. It's a lie. They don't need more taxes to provide the services. They have the money. They don't want to spend their money. They want to take your money and spend it on that.
Right.
Duh.
That's so key right there, is that they're extracting.
Elections are rigged.
Sorry.
Well, that's all good. They're extracting for the purposes of perpetuating their existence. That's a parasite.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, come on. We have a parasitic governance, and we have, you know, hedge fund hyenas and corporate wolves. You know, that use this parasitic mechanism to, you know.
So I think a good solution is to go. You know,
attack the mechanism.
You got to go on the offense. It's really defense, but when you are in self-defense, you have to a good defense is good offense, right?
Right.
So don't be, I mean, it's hard because you are reacting to things happening to you. I believe in that. Like the government is always the first mover. Unless you go and commit a crime, they're usually the first mover, like in a speeding violation.
Right.
You know, there's no victim in that
at
all. It's a municipal violation. It's a whole nother color of law bullshit that they do.
Revenue extraction.
But they're the first mover in that case. You have to be reactive, but don't be reactive, like go into that ignorant, you know, because then you're really going to react in a way that they want you to.
Definitely.
So be proactive in your reaction, go on the offense in your defense, and assert yourself, and understand your rights, come to know them, and don't let anybody deprive them. And, you know, I think another problem is, like, Americans especially have this certain sense of hospitality and like sensibility about them. They want to be seen as doing the right thing, being a good person, not trying to deprive anyone of anything. And you have this very aggressive government saying, you're depriving me of this. And they're just like cowering, like, oh, well, I would never want to not pay my fair share. You know, like I'm definitely going to, I want to do my part, you know? And so some of this ideas that I have will be seen as like, oh, well, you're selfish. You just want to keep everything to yourself and you don't want to share anything for the common good. And I'm like, what's more in the common good? If I keep the fruits of my labor and I can reinvest it into something that creates more fruits, or I can volunteer to send my wealth to a parasitic attacking government who's perpetuating evil across the world. I mean, how am I'm not taking from this is not a selfish endeavor at all. I think it's actually selfless and puts the person, either way, you're in grave jeopardy.
Right.
That's the other misconception, is like, well, I just want to follow the rules so that I don't get in trouble. And it's like you're putting yourself in prison.
Are leading you into trouble.
Yeah,
right?
Exactly.
The rules lead you into trouble. And that's the thing is, you know, the sub silentio word of the day is really key, because it's through this silent, quote unquote, social contract that we all just implicitly sign by existing.
Sub silentio.
Sub silentio.
It's implied but not expressly stated. And I'll reference again Lysander Spooner, Constitution of No Authority. That's another good, very short read that can get you in a good mindset to maybe take a different look at some of these issues than you have in the past. Because, I mean, I think he makes a bunch of really good, valid points that don't require a substantive knowledge of like Supreme Court cases.
Exactly.
Like, you don't have to like defend yourself with subsections of the Internal Revenue Code or go into the minutia of the Internal Revenue Manual. He just uses common sense and logic to basically say, well, where's the agreement to be bound by these things that you call laws?
Right.
Where is the consent that was garnered there? And it's just an interesting question, because if it's a police officer or a judge or a tax clerk or something, what are they going to say to that? Where's my consent? I'm telling you, you don't have it. Where did I agree to these terms? Well, we all agreed. And he's like, no, we didn't. In this book, Constitution of No Authority, he's like, it was signed by some number of men. He specifies the actual number, I forget, but they're all dead. How does that have any authority over me? Constitution of No Authority. My name isn't on there. Right. Even if it was my grandfather, he can't sign for me. I didn't even exist yet.
Well, and then the opposite is actually occurring, is that now the current, if you fail the swatch test, the current generation is being punished for the crimes of things that happened over 160 years ago.
Oh, you can't get out of the Social Security system because... Right. And why shouldn't we be able to opt out of the Social Security scheme? Because it's been admitted to be a Ponzi scheme. That's how it's run. They admit it. There's no trust where the money goes, and it's all squandered. It's all been squandered.
Right.
So
from the outset,
what is paid out today is based on the people currently paying in, and the people paying in are even told by the boomers enjoying the benefits of that. Hey, well, I paid in. I need to get mine. Yeah, enjoy it, buddy. Hopefully you die before the whole thing collapses, because I know I'm not getting anything. So what incentive do I have to sign my kids up for a Social Security number when I know by the time they would ever extract anything from it, it will be a thing of the past. So it's a waste of time.
Yeah, they're gonna. That in the advent of some sort of Bretton Woods 2.0, that they're going to restructure.
Oh yeah, we've got all the numbers. We're gonna reevaluate, and we're gonna deposit money in your account based on what you've already put in. We'll kind of figure that all out, and it's kind of like deciding to put more money into a liquidity pool while all the big wallets are leaving it. You're basically just handing your money from yourself to them. You're just handing it to them. Right. And that literally you're seeing the boomers spend the Social Security money that you're working for today, earning.
Absolutely.
You're seeing them spend it.
Absolutely.
And just know those dollars that go there every single pay period, you're not going to get them.
Right.
And so it's just so morally objectionable to be told by anybody. I don't care who on earth, if it's the Pope, I don't care, that, well, that's just how it is. So we just have to keep going. And I'm like, that is a road to hell.
Right. That's exactly right.
We cannot continue to consent to this when we know as adult human beings that it's just self-defeating to do so. It is sub silentio suicide.
Yes. I mean, and that is what the whole system pig psychology is essentially based on. Is just compliance unto extinction. And we've seen that enforced and rammed down everyone's throats the past 2 years, especially.
Yeah, somebody commented in the Telegram about this whole sub silentio tax issue. That's just like the mask mandates.
Yep.
It was never a law.
Yep.
It was implied that it was required, but it really never was. We exposed that with the Costco report,
right,
where you go to a Costco and boy, it sure feels like it's required. They tell you it is when you go to the door, but then you go to the official corporate policy and the official county quote mandate. There's no mandate.
No,
it's a joke.
Yeah,
it's a toothless piece of paper that Mr. Mayor put out.
Paper tigers.
Paper tigers.
Lots of paper tigers.
I've really enjoyed this episode.
Oh yeah, well, and I have as well, and it's interesting because we've also mentioned that a lot of the governmental tactics resemble that of stuff that's gone down in South Africa, and that one of the ways that they've adapted is by sort of leveraging. I'm talking about like the Afrikaners and Boers and people who are like persona non gratas and are still the only thing really holding the entire agricultural sector together, but they're maligned because they're landholders and blah blah blah. So I just hope that it doesn't become another Zimbabwe, because I mean there's all kinds of stuff that's
where they come to your house and just start burning shit,
right?
Because well, that's why I love it when city folk put down country folk as being a bunch of idiot bumpkins,
sure,
unsophisticated, ignoramuses. And it's like, well, they allow you to live in a city. The farmers, the agrarians,
right, the
salt of the earth people. Where do you think your produce comes from?
Right.
I mean, literally, and it's just more of this eat your own psychology that we've been seeing. Gerald Silentio always said, when someone loses everything, they lose it.
Right.
And they got nothing else to lose, they lose it. And I feel like that's where many people are at in this country, and you see the different directions that can take a person. Sometimes It's like a really good thing. They lose it and they're like so fed up that they finally get off their ass to do something about it in a constructive way. But then you also see the whole, geez, we don't have time to cover the whole abortion situation. But man, I actually have a pretty good clip to play maybe as an outro on that note. But people are committing violent acts in promotion of violence. To me, they've lost it. Like, you've lost everything. You've lost your morals. You've lost your soul. You've lost your logic. You've lost your argument. You've lost. What are you even fighting for? And now you're out here committing violence in promotion of. I mean, it doesn't get much more. You've lost it than that. Other than maybe the reptile banker.
Yeah, but at least the reptile banker isn't
seems harmless,
subjecting people to horrific.
Gave cotton candy to the neighbor kids.
I mean, it's clearly mental afflicted for sure.
Yeah.
But in the event of someone like Gendron, just doing a LARP and being a Fed, like,
right?
Come on, so obvious. But going back to the hot button issue, the thing that they're trying to make the entire 2022 talking point about, which is Roe versus Wade.
Right.
I mean, come on.
Have you seen this guy, Cassidy Campbell? He's an actor, comedian, sort of YouTuber. And
oh yeah, Mark Dice and Alex Stein do this.
Yes, where they basically and I fully support these tactics.
Sure.
At this point, because you and I both have been in the city council halls and being
maybe we should.
I'm saying that's what I'm saying, dude. For promotional purposes, this would do very well, and I could be sarcastic like this.
Oh, me too.
But being serious, we were serious for years. Fighting the fluoride thing, it didn't really do much. There wasn't a whole lot of impact, even though I think our videos were great and exposing and fun to watch, and anybody who would tune in, I think it would have an impact on them, but it just doesn't have the same kind of impact as going viral with something like this. And satire is one of the best ways to kind of expose the idiocracy of what's going on.
Definitely.
Because this guy, he goes up here, he's purporting to be a BLM activist, he's a white guy, and he's promoting abortion. His promotion of abortion is not that far off.
Exactly.
And that's what is amazing, is like when you have someone like put it down on paper and actually read it out, it's like, oh, holy shit. That's so I think we got 2 minutes left. Let's end this on this clip, and thank you guys for joining and hanging in there. We've got 4 concurrent viewers. All right. Average view duration at 26 minutes. People hanging in there.
Hey, that's good.
Thank you for listening. We're going to put up another episode as soon as we can. Check us out, Zetetic.news on Instagram, Telegram, Twitter, and YouTube for now. And, of course, Theta TV and on Theta Edgecast. All right, this is Dave and Xavier Diamant signing off.
Hey, what up? Hello, my oppressors. My name Brian. I'm 2% black, and only Black Lives Matter. Keyword, only. RIP to the last person who said all lives matter. I'm here today to stand up for abortion, because it saves a lot of time, and time is money. Because of Planned Parenthood, I can raw dog as many females as I want without having to worry or stress about someone getting pregnant. And I can live my life to the fullest, the way that I want to. I remember one time I got this fat chick pregnant off Tinder when she came over for a little late night something, because I was bored. Shoot, I swear, I was stretching like crazy. But she had called me up the next day, and she had said she had did the abortion. So I was like, bet, I can get back to raw dogging now. I wrote this bill called the Pro-Life Bill, which needs to be passed ASAP. And here's what's fitting to be in it. Anyone who is black that receives an abortion should receive a $5,000 stimulus check, and white people will get $1,000. Abortion will be done at urgent care clinics for $50 in case you need something quick so you don't have to stress. Abortion will be free for the black community. Abortion will be allowed up to 1 year after birth in case the baby ugly, because ain't nobody want to see no ugly kid on TikTok. If a black woman gets an abortion, she will get to visit the White House and receive the Presidential Medal of Freedom from Joe Biden. Anyone who receives an abortion will be labeled a national hero, and Black Lives Matter will riot and loot for them. If a woman is denied an abortion, it will be mandatory that the Black Lives Matter burns down buildings for them until it happened. Anyone who receives an abortion will get entitled to or entered into a $1 million lottery. If you're black, you get to enter twice. Anyone who gets an abortion will get a free Krispy Kreme donut. Black people get 2. If you want to fly on an airplane or travel internationally, you must get an abortion to protect those around you. In order to get a driver's license, you must show proof that you are fully aborted. Proof of abortion will be needed to enter the grocery store. You must present full proof of abortion to get a job. If anyone is caught using a fake abortion card, they will be fully prosecuted to the full extent of the law and will spend life in prison. And if bad enough, they could face the death penalty. Also, Father's Day is racist to the black community and needs to be canceled immediately. Last of all, before I go, I love abortion because Bill Gates' dad, William Gates Sr., founded Planned Parenthood, and I'm a big fan of Bill Gates because he's trying to put a microchip in us, which means I will be able to play my PlayStation without the controller, because it's finna be inside me, and I won't have to worry about nobody messing up my game no more. Black Lives Matter! Black Lives Matter!
Thank you.